G'day everybody and welcome to the panel where we look at the world through the frame of the comic book. My name is Jason Badow. I'm a writer and artist for DC Comics and I'm currently working on DC Comics' Black Label graphic novel, Joker Harley Criminal Sanity Volume 2. A real-world forensically accurate take on the Joker and Harley Quinn, and some other familiar faces, hint hint. I am joined today by Scott Stuart, who is not only one of my best buds, but also the owner of every single Avengers comic since 1963, and also closing in on every single issue of Iron Man. This is our episode 2 of our scene analysis of Deadpool and Wolverine. We just finished covering Wade at work as well as his sordid reading material.
Let's go.
Been selling cars now, and he has this conversation with Peter where they ride their bikes back to. It's ironic they're both car salesmen and they both like ride bikes. How'd you find Peter in this movie?
All too brief, but I don't think I wanted him in it more because that would have spoilt the gag at the end where every Deadpool has a Peter. He's definitely in that sort of Merlin-esque role of providing some guidance and some assistance to Wade along his journey. And Peter's good heart and substantial package, we later find out, are a sprinkling of contrast to Wade's cynicism and mockery and crudity. And merely by friends gives Wade credibility as a better person than you might assume after he sits in the back of the car like a son in front of some very underage children.
I saw him less of the wisdom conferring type and more as what you said, an embodiment of Wade's goodness, that he is a reminder to Wade of what it is to just be good and to be a good person and to be happy with his life and to have a sort of moral fiber lighthouse that really just reflects on Wade really well by having someone like Peter in his life who is so full of joy and love for his friend. Like you could see when he is during the birthday cake scene, when Wade is giving his speech, the way he looks at Wade, he really loves this guy as a friend and he wants the best for him, not in any weird way, but in an absolutely pure way. And I think that to me is really what Peter's role is, just an embodiment and also a line in the sand that lets us, the audience, know that if a guy like this can like Wade, then he can't be all that bad. I feel that Peter ends up in the camp of doing some of the pre-apologizing that the movie did for Wade that I didn't think needed to be done because they managed to sand off so many of those edges that Wade used to have that enabled him to come across as far more palatable character. But Peter, regardless, great character and really fun to see him back in the movie.
Rob Delaney is a very funny gentleman and really brought the right tone through the role in both of his appearances.
So then we get to the party. What did you think of the party, Scott?
It reminded me why I don't have them. The found family, that's a very popular metaphor in a lot of nerd fiction for reasons that any nerd watching this doesn't need me to nerd-splain to them. It was sadly the only moments we got with some of the beloved characters from the franchise that there really wasn't room for in the broader plot.
For that reason, I consider this the worst scene in the movie because this is the driving force for Wade and Deadpool, the entire movie. And yet we do not get to see him really connect with everybody in the room. What am I talking about? So, for example, like that really embodied these people as his family. I thought the conversation with Blind Owl was really good. I thought that was a winner. Although I thought Negasonic got subsumed by the Yukio relationship, whereas I knew Negasonic beforehand, and Yukio is this sort of icing that went on the cake. And I love the banter that she has with Wade, but it shouldn't come at the expense of actually having some sort of communication with the Negasonic. Because especially in Deadpool 1, there is so much amazing communication between the two, and then a little bit less in the sequel, and even less now in the third one. I think Negasonic is a really fun character. And I don't think taking apart Wade's hair system is really that sort of bonding that needed to be done. I really felt that every single one of those characters needed to have a moment with Wade where you understood why he cared and loved these people. And I did not feel that at all. It was literally just rolling them out in the simplest way possible, be like, hey, remember this person. Whereas what you really needed was some real emotional connection there. Does that sort of make sense?
It does. These characters are not Psylocke and Pyro and the Juggernaut. These are people that we've come into this with a history with and an affection for. And yeah, they didn't get their justice in this scene or at all in the other end of this bookend at the end of the movie. And yeah, that is a real shame.
It's a real shame, because especially when the entire motivation of your character relies on his relationships with these 9 people. And on one level, you're just like, okay, I get it. Only the hugest a-hole in the world is going to let his friends die. But on the other hand, that's a whole lot of token grandfathering rather than actually establishing that these people are people that he has real connections with. For example, Colossus, instead of talking about the Great British Bake Off, should have been like, hey, Wade, I'm going to re-sponsor your application again for the X-Men. I'm not going to give up on you. We're going to go through this again. And you realize that because that's what Peter does. He never gives up on Wade, and he wouldn't. If Wade got knocked back from the X-Men, he would keep fighting for Wade to be included in that. Pinder also, he got to just run over the headmaster at the end and completely close the loop on his Kirsten Dunst-like desire for blood from Interview with the Vampire reference. He even got to do the slow-mo walk-off with all the other killers at the end of the movie. Why is he back driving a cab? Why hasn't he started working at St. Margaret's? Why isn't he working as a hitman? What if he's having actually some level of success and Wade is scared for him and what that's doing to his friend? Just something that takes the material from before and extrapolates it forward. It really broke my heart on that. But I have some logistical questions, man. Why is Shatterstar there? Didn't he get diced up in a helicopter blade?
Wade did go back and save some of the members of X-Force at the end of Deadpool 2. We don't see him save Shatterstar, though. And given the method of Shatterstar's death, I'm not sure, short of not having them jump out of the plane at all, in which case they all would have survived. On the other hand, he's a striking-looking dude who looks like he comes from a different planet, and it was unexpected to have him in the circle. I'm not going to pick it apart.
What I found really weird was the people that should have been there that weren't there. What I'm talking about is Domino. Where was Domino? Russell? Where was Fire Fist? Of all these people, you cannot tell me that Fire Fist is missing his birthday. And to a lesser extent, Cable. I don't think Cable needed to be there, and Domino, you could make an argument for, but Russell? Why wasn't Russell there, man? That was weird for me. If you're going to have Shatterstar, not Domino and Russell.
I think in a comic, they would definitely be there, where you don't need actors who have availability and be paid and screen time to dedicate to 3 more rounds of dialogue. I absolutely agree that purely from an in-universe, a kayfabe perspective, if you like, that's an omission and something that could have been solved with a birthday card, but it didn't bother me. The only time you have all of your friends and family at your birthday parties is when you're under 10 years old. Once you get to the teenage years even, there's always somebody who can't make it, has other things going on. And as adults, you're lucky to see 2 people that you know have free time on the same night that you. It's, let alone be in the same part of the world at the time. But yeah, a birthday card or a singing telegram or something like that, it would have been a good bit of business before the TVA arrived and would have at least gestured in the direction of those relationships.
The other big failure in the scene for me was also Vanessa. Vanessa has been so important in his life. And when I sit back and look at the movie and able to analyze the structure of what happened and the decisions, the way that relationship disintegrated, I needed something far more painful in that scene than just hanging out with your ex and still having feelings for her. I needed something way more symbolic of what had actually happened. Like even for her to be like, hey, Wade, what are you doing now? And for him to be like, oh, I'm just selling cars, and to see the pain in her eyes of realizing that he still hasn't found himself. He's still lost. He doesn't know what he wants to do, because that's what it comes down to. It's not she left him because he just completely lost himself and he shut her out of this downward spiral that he found himself in. And for him to still not find something that she's really completely lost who he is, would be really sad for her. Rather than having her moving on also, I still feel like having her see the genuine affection for him at the start, rather than what we see just at the end after he's sacrificed himself.
100% agree. Vanessa was too important to him and to the reason the first 2 movies worked at all. You can argue that she should have had a bigger role in the sequel, and I'll listen to those arguments, but I don't really have a problem with how it worked out and the role she played in that story. You can't feature all of your supporting cast in every episode. But yeah, there needed to be more here, more in that moment than Wade's longing face, and a little more awkwardness, a little barb about the past, some friction there that could be overcome by the end to better illustrate the change that had taken place in both of them. Even though, for totally valid reasons, she really wasn't much in the movie.
I also agree that in this movie, she shouldn't have any more screen time. I think that structurally, to have her at the start and the end is absolutely great in capping the movie. What I'm talking about is actually doing more with the time that she had. When I talk about comic books, I use the metaphor of real estate. I'm like, okay, in this panel, I got to build the biggest, nicest house that I can. Can you build a skyscraper on this tiny little panel? Some artists can do that. You get your George Perez's and your Frank Whiteley's who just cram so much detail into that one panel. They're literally building a skyscraper on that tiny little block of land on that tiny panel. And I felt that in these few minutes that we had with Vanessa, you had to build that skyscraper. This scene is the absolute emotional underpinning and motivator for Wade for the first half of the movie until he starts having Wolverine there to anti-mentor him. It's his passion, and even then, it's his passion for his friends and Vanessa that actually managed to change Wolverine's mind. And if you don't see that connection with each one of his friends, I don't want to hear Dopinder finding AirPods yet again and them all giving him crap. Dude, it's AirPods again. It's always AirPods that you find back there. That's not the heart of what Dopinder is about. That's not what brought him into our hearts and why we love Dopinder as a character and why we felt for Vanessa too. Each one of them should have had a moment where you realize how they're all moving on. They're having great lives and they all just feel desperately sad for Wade because they don't know what to do. I needed to feel that love from each one of them. And that was a miss in an otherwise very well written movie.
I'm wondering if there was a draft where they all had a more explicit moment like you're describing. And they toned it down because it would seem treacly and Disney-esque in a way that hasn't had to be before. It was able to be a little more real, for want of a better word, to describe a character who heals from all wounds. Because I can definitely see a version where a heart-to-heart moment with everybody in a 5-minute space is just too much.
It is, as long as you have it to different degrees. You don't need to have a 10 out of 10 with everybody, but you need to at least see some level of connection with everybody around him. Because I felt there was no connection with anybody whatsoever. He's having these absolutely awkward conversations with people that he obviously hasn't seen in a very long time. But I didn't feel that love other than these are my friends and they're my friends. I don't think you can just usher that level of relationship, especially when your entire movie hinges on this. I was talking about Logan, that the first half of the motivation of that movie, of the driving force of that movie is Boyd Holbrook and as the antagonist. And I really struggled with that. But on the other hand, it also had Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman having this absolutely driving, powerful, captivating relationship that managed to offset it. This does have Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds doing their thing, and it's very powerful motivator otherwise to enjoy the film. But on the other hand, I feel having this very empty, hollow, oh, these are my friends and I have to save them. Yes, I get that, but make me feel like why you want to save them. Make me care that you want to save them, rather than I was more just there for Wade and just being like, yeah, I hope you don't lose your friends, buddy. That's rather than being like, oh yeah, oh my God, Dopinder can't die. And reminding me of what a great character Dopinder's been. All right, so then we get to the TVA, Marvel Jesus, and all the exposition in this movie, in this scene. Pegging did happen to happen in the first Deadpool. Scott, do you remember the scene where the pegging happened?
Vividly etched onto my brain.
For those of you wondering, Wade is pansexual, which means he's attracted to everybody regardless of their gender identity, how they look, or anything going on anywhere. If he finds you attractive, he will jump you if you have anything, even maybe you don't even need the right parts. One of the things that I really enjoyed in this scene when the TVA turn up and he thinks that they're strippers is that they actually had some goddamn tactics for a change, that when it comes to knocking on somebody's door, that they know how to ambush somebody, which is how the TVA should be working. If you're sending normal people up against superpowered beings, you need to ambush the hell out of them. So later on when you get the cameos from Blade and Elektra being like, they just knocked on my door and the next thing I know I'm here. Yeah, that sort of worked the way they tagged and bagged Deadpool. Their tactics to never be in a straight up fight. Because even when we see Matthew McFadden later take them out, Mr. Paradox, he uses subterfuge and stealth rather than one-on-one fight with the guys. What did you think of Mr. Paradox?
He was deliciously slimy. I haven't seen Succession, but I can see him in that milieu and being just as odious, but in a more serious way. And he chewed scenery to just the right level. It was hammy. It was a well-cured ham. It didn't stink up the joint. It was at a perfect, appropriate level of hamminess. And yeah, amazing casting, breakout performance. I'll never forget him now after this role.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought it was such a good, like, apex sociopathic CEO, corporate exec in a public service role who is really just wants nothing more than ambition at the cost of anybody and everything, and is quite happy to throw it all under the bus so he can get what he wants. In the comics, Paradox is apparently a clone of Mobius, Owen Wilson. This is obviously not the case now. And also on the same upper middle management level as Ouroboros and Mr. Tesseract, Mr. Ouroboros we saw in Loki season 2. I really liked how he did not care about his time antics. That immediately was, is this because I went back in time and just, nope, walk with me.
Look, 2 seasons of Loki, we'd probably have really cared about that. The evolution of the TVA, though, is plain from how they began and the difference in tactics that they were employing. The TVA at the start of Loki season 1 would have been very concerned with branching timelines and so forth. But Marvel has embraced the multiverse, and so must the TVA.
One of the things that I always love to do is to really take a good long look at the villain, because they're pretty much what instigates all the action of the hero. If you don't have a good reason for the villain doing stuff, then the hero doesn't have a good reason to fight against all this stuff. And I quite like his motivations, Mr. Paradox's motivations in the movies. What I don't really love is the way he goes about doing that. Let me explain. So his job is to get Wade out of the timeline and then babysit the timeline for the next 2,000 years until it eventually disappears. And I don't want to do that for 2,000 years. That is an absolutely waste of my endless ambition, which I understand. I can't imagine anybody would want to do that except for maybe Homer Simpson. If you're effectively immortal, I don't know what 10,000 years is to you. Most normal human beings would not want to do that. It's a dead-end job, basically. I get that he wants to get out of it. It is so inefficient. I don't understand why he's building this giant time ripper when they used to prune timelines with their time reset charges. Remember, they put the little things on the ground, go back through the portal, and it would just wipe out the timeline like that. Are there not any of them lying around?
The Time Ripper is built of those. Each charge took out one branch, and what he's trying to do is wipe out that entire universe with all of its branches coming off. So the Time Ripper is built, I think, it certainly looks like it, like the internals of the machine are those charges, just stacks and stacks of them. So I think that's what the Time Ripper is, that's what the plan is, that's why it needs to be a bigger MacGuffin than we got in just pruning one little branch of a tree you're leaving healthy.
Oh, that makes so much more sense. See, that's why I love doing these things. I throw the stuff out that I don't understand. If there are any more explanations, if somebody else has another reason, chuck it down in the comments. So the other thing that I don't understand is, why does he think this new way of doing things is going to impress B15 or whoever is running the TVA these days? What he needed to be doing was setting Deadpool up as the one who started the Time Ripper, because otherwise it's going to come out that he's the one that pruned the timeline. At least then if he gets out of this job and is able to try and find a better job, but convincing everybody to go back to do what they were all doing before, I guess they were just pruning timelines, whereas he just wants to be like, oh no, this is my huge new way of doing things. We need to just completely cut off at the base. Is that it? It's just like, this is a new way of doing things. We just end entire universes immediately.
It absolutely doesn't make any sense as a political strategy. But one thing we did see in, I think even season 1 of Loki, was that the TVA isn't monolithic, that there are factions and spheres of interest competing with each other, as there are in any bureaucratic organization. And it probably wouldn't have flown with B15. There may have been competing factions whose favor hoping to gain. That is absolutely head, but yeah. Ask the question, that's the answer I came up with. I agree, it's not in the movie.
I'm happy with that answer. No, I'm happy with that answer. Technically, in an organization as large as the TVA, you would have multiple factions, so that while you might have one CEO at the head, you would have a whole bunch of people underneath that would all have different vying philosophies about how the business would actually work. Makes total sense to me. And I do have to say, for all the TVA's faults, that the Avengers knocked Deadpool back, the X-Men knocked him back, kicked him to the curb. The only people that believe in Deadpool are the TVA. Their mandate is, no, you are actually special. You will be special. Come on out. You got that going for you, Deadpool. The bad guys love you.
Which in and of itself isn't given clear motivation as to why this Wade, why any Wade needs to be saved from a universe. It's the sort of thing that needs to happen so the movie happens, but in the proverbial kayfabe sense, that's something I don't get. What the TVA wanted him for.
I don't think this is a record, but if Scott and I were going through the road to Deadpool Wolverine, we would consider if certain characters had made certain other logical choices, that the movie would end much earlier than it did. And I would like to posit to you my theory as to how Deadpool Wolverine could have ended in about 28 minutes.
Please do.
All right. He's got the tempad. He falls backwards. He goes home. He takes a sip out of his new I Heart Me mug. He walks outside. He walks across the street, down the stairs to the subway, kills every last motherfracking TVA agent down there, and destroys the Time Ripper immediately. He knows where it is. He knows everything already. It's not like they can stop him.
And Indiana Jones doesn't actually do anything in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
He didn't have to go get Wolverines. All he had to do was end the Time Ripper and then use the Tempad to go back to the TVA and kill Mr. Paradox and everybody else there. End of movie, 28 minutes, maybe 29. Let's say a minute for the Time Ripper and another minute for ending the TVA. Doesn't need a Wolverine.
But then you'd have had all this money you didn't get to spend on Chris Evans.
I can do this all day.
Still one of my favorite lines in the movie. You just got that kid killed. Do you know what he was doing to the budget? Kid, Chris Evans is actually 43 years old. Does that weird you out? The guy playing Captain America is younger than us?
No, I have had to get used to that over the last couple of decades. Almost every active professional wrestler is now younger than me. All the movie stars are younger than me, except for Tom Cruise, who somehow doesn't age, and Morgan Freeman, who was always older than me.
We did discover that Paul Rudd finally aged. We got that confirmation. That's another great line.
It's amazing what the Los Angeles lifestyle can do for you if you're rich enough to afford it.
Yes, I should have stayed there. So the only thing that my solution wouldn't bring is that his timeline would still have died in 2,000 years. But would he care? Would he really care based on his current emotional state? His friends would be fine. None of them are going to live for 2,000 years. He might be sick of living after 2,000 years. Everybody wins.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine selling used cars for 5 minutes, let alone 2 millennia.
Give me a hell yeah.
And so then we go back to what I call Wolver Claws Pool. Whoever came up with the idea to finally put the Logan claws on Deadpool just deserves a gold star in my book. I'll just give you a big hug and a giant high five or fist bump or whatever appropriate form of affection you would like. That was just an absolutely killer idea. And the choreography where it starts out really cool and then becomes absolutely awkward was hilarious. What did you think of the moment, Scott?
When he couldn't get the claws out of the first guy and the second guy's coming at him. Yeah, how does Wolverine deal with this, dude? I guess Wolverine can retract really the claws, hard. So he doesn't actually have to, pull the axe out of the tree. But it was such fun.
And one of the things that really made the movie worthwhile for me, and again, the pacing of the movie, the title sequences, the scripting, really tight in some ways. As I said, maybe the emotional beat was a little bit off there, overwhelmed by some of the direction early on in Happy's scene. When it comes to moments like this, holy cow, Sean Levy and the team were just put together, just such great stuff. And I do wonder if sometimes that's the advantage of having the director on the writing team. We could be like, hey, if we can sync that up, we can run my titles there and blah, 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 blah. And you get a great image that actually also becomes the title sequence that encaps that part, that act. I just think there's some very clever people working on this. So then we get to probably one of the best montages in the movie, and that is the hunt for Wolverine. So let's go through them, man. I believe you might have some covers to go through with this. Let's start off with the comic accurate Logan. Like your thoughts on the short and hairy, because in the comics, I believe Logan is
5'5" or 5'3".
I think he's 5'3" in the comic. So he's when they say comic accurate Logan in the movie, I don't think he's quite comic accurate. He's not quite that short. My wife is 5'3" and she can look over the edge of a bar. Let's put it that way.
Let's assume Jace goes to the effort of finding a copy cover for Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 8, and puts it there or wherever the hell he's going to stick it. And you'll get to see a size comparison of Wolverine and the Hulk. And you'll also get to see Wolverine in his patch outfit, which we get a reference to. Really liked the joke because Wolverine is pretty short in the comics. Although I really feel like he's grown in stature subtly through time. He was much noticeably shorter back in the original Claremont days. But to actually see little Hugh Jackman, that popped me.
I wish he'd been more muscly, though. That would have been my thing, that if he'd just been like this gigantic, tiny guy, that would have really sold totally comic accurate Wolverine for me. Otherwise, it was pretty on point. I do think Wolverine's grown to about 5'10" these days, depending on the artist. Somewhere around the average. I think that would be his average these days. A little bit shorter than Cap, around Peter's height. Spider-Man's height is pretty much where I think most artists put him these days. But he also seems pretty fussy when his universe is at stake and he just knocks back a guy for being a little vertically challenged, especially when he's the only Wolverine that didn't immediately kill him. Then we get to the Age of Apocalypse
I apologize for the reflection. I do have this one. And yeah, that was very comics accurate presentation there, as all these bits were. The Age of Apocalypse Wolverine, who you can't tell from this cover, and they didn't do it in the movie, but he does have claws that come out of the stump arm there.
That was one of the twists in the comic, that he's fighting and then someone's getting the better of him, and then he pops the claws out of the stump of his hand and goes to town. I remember that being a really cool moment. Adam Kubert, I'm pretty sure Adam Kubert art directed this cover for me at DC. So he got some very nice feedback and thoughts from him on that. Very grateful for his help on that. He absolutely elevated it. What is the Age of Apocalypse, Scott? I barely remember.
The Age of Apocalypse was an alternate future, I think, where Apocalypse had taken over the world and enslaved most of the cast of the X-Men. Typical 90s dystopian future. I want to say it was the first big universe-shaking crossover in the post-Claremont era.
Up to that point, I've been able to keep my fingers in every part of the Marvel pie in some way, shape, or form, between the amount of money that I was able to spend and all my friends' comic book collections. And when I started looking at the X-books, which I absolutely loved, and the cost of trying to keep up with an event like Age of Apocalypse. And yes, you could read part of it and you'll be fine, but there was a FOMO part of it to me that I was just like, if I can't have it all, I'm just not going to do it. And I'm out of it. And so I think that was the crossover event that finally got me out of the X-books.
And it's about 12 months before Marvel went into bankruptcy. Because they were pulling like this all the time, there's a lot of fan jerking around, really taking advantage of the loyalty that they'd spent 3 decades building. And they threw it all away and went bankrupt.
Oh man, I hope you're enjoying these half as much as we do making these. I get paid to draw superheroes and I love it. And I'm so grateful for it. But I'm able to continue chatting about them, which is also something I love. Well, that's up to you. And if you vote yes, then please hit that like button. If you're on for the ride, then maybe hit that subscribe button and YouTube will deliver our next video to your virtual doorstep. And before you leave, please consider checking out some of Scott's and my other videos on the MCU and superheroes in general. The really old ones need to be watched at 1.25 speed, but they're still pretty good, and I'm very happy and very proud of them. Check the notes below for an MCU style hint, and wishing you and yours the best, and hope we've managed to make your day, if not a little bit brighter, then hopefully a lot nerdier. I love you. Thank you so much. How do you hang out with your friends? Restaurants, bars, clubs, maybe over at someone's house just staring at a TV screen, or just sort of hanging out. And if you sit around watching a movie, that's cool, but you're not really talking. I still, hand on my heart, believe that the best way to hang out with your friends is to play a role-playing game. Unlike a board game, role-playing games are not competitive. They are cooperative. You and your friends actually hanging out and creating stories and moments that you'll look back on and laugh at together. But the worst thing about role-playing games is getting started. There's a lot of rules, and being the games master takes a heck of a lot of preparation time each week. Enter GameMastersForHire.com. If you've always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, GameMastersForHire.com are experts at teaching you all the rules while taking you on an epic adventure. And if you're loving it, you can play the same character every session, who will then get more and more powerful. If you're a wannabe dungeon or game master, there's no faster way to learn and be great at it than booking a training session with GameMastersForHire.com. For the experienced D&D groups out there, if you're looking for a special birthday gift for your DM, the best gift you can give is to let them be a player for a change by booking a birthday adventure. GameMastersForHire.com will make sure the guest of honor is treated like a hero on their special day. Game Masters for Hire can also run games for anyone, from dinner parties to kids' parties, corporate events, bachelor or bachelorette nights, to ongoing campaigns every week where you play the same character every session. It's like a story that you're building with your friends. GameMastersForHire.com are available online, which is how I play with them. But if you live in the greater Los Angeles area, they can do in-person games with miniatures and sets that'll blow your mind. Please visit GameMastersForHire.com for more information. Reach out to Ollie and his team, and they'll help you out, whatever you need. And just like going out to dinner, split the cost between the lot of you. I'll even kick in. Just use my offer code BADOWER for 10% off your first game. I promise you're going to have an amazing time that you'll always remember. Thank you, GameMastersForHire.com, for sponsoring this video. Oh my God, aren't we all just trained to sit through credits and mid-credit sequences? Well, you are at the end of the credits. Look, I just want to talk to you quickly about my comics. Joker Harley Criminal Sanity Volume 2 is coming out. You can pick up Volume 1. It is a forensically accurate take on the Joker and Harley Quinn. We got an actual psychiatrist to consult what if Joker and Harley Quinn were created today with our greater understanding of mental health. And also Artemis, a graphic novel that I wrote with Lindsey Stirling. Yes, that Lindsey Stirling, the superstar violinist. We wrote a graphic novel together. We art directed it together, and it is just something that I'm so proud of. Please check this out, as well as an upcoming free comic that I'll be releasing. Thank you again. Please check out these other videos below. Love you. Take care.